Good morning. Today, I'll continue with the constructors. We have seen that a constructor is a special member function which is used to initialize the objects of a class. Now, uh, in a constructor, we have seen that it is defined in defined in the public section of a class. It can be declared in the public section and it can be defined outside using the scope resolution. In that way, it is similar to a function. Now, types of constructors we have seen in the previous class. There are three types of constructors. First one, default constructor. It is also called the zero argument constructor. And the second one is the parameterized constructor. And the third one is the copy constructor. Today, let us see the parameterized constructors. Look at the slide now. A parameterized constructor has one or more parameters or arguments in its definition. Using this constructor, we can provide different values to data members of different objects by passing the appropriate values as arguments, which cannot be done by the default constructor. We have seen in default constructor, we don't pass any arguments. That is why it is not possible to initialize different objects of a class with the different values to the data members. So we are using parameterized constructor for that purpose. We can have any number of parameters in a given constructor. That means a parameterized constructor can have any number of parameters. Also, there may be more than one parameterized constructors defined in a particular class. Now, let us see some other properties of syntax of the parameterized constructor. Now, see, there is a class and the constructor is having the same name as that of its class. Look at the syntax. Class name, parameter 1, parameter 2, etc. in the parenthesis. And the definition of that normally includes the statements to construct the data members, the constructor definition statements. Here is an example. ABC int x, comma int y, open the brace, then A is equal to x, B is equal to y. That is the definition of the data members assigned to the values x and y respectively. That's the definition. Now, let us see the program. Here is a program. Can you see this? Class ABC, private int a comma b, public ABC is the default constructor. Usually in a class, when we have other constructors, it becomes sometimes mandatory to define a default constructor also, because in case in the main the user creates an object simply without giving any parameters, there should be a default constructor. That is the purpose of writing a default constructor even if we define a parameterized constructor. That is why there is ABC default constructor. A is 0, B is 0 in the definition. This one, ABC int x comma int y, where A is equal to x and B is equal to y, that is the parameterized constructor you can see here now. And display is another normal member function of the class. Here is the main section of this void main ABC A1. This A1 object is created, which automatically calls the default constructor. So A and B of this object A1 will be initialized to 0 and 0 respectively. Then ABC A2, within parentheses, we pass two arguments 100 and 200. Now this statement, while creating object A2, invokes or calls the parameterized constructor. That is why A will be assigned to the value 100 and B will be assigned to the value 200. So A and B of object A2 will be assigned with or initialized with the values 100 and 200, which are passed as arguments. Naturally, we can call the display function using these two objects A1 and A2. Now, let us write a program by having another example. Now, consider a class like maybe a box. the class box, let it have two data members, length and breadth. And in the public section, we have anyway the constructor. Let us define the default constructor box. I will initialize length to 0 and breadth also to 0. Now let us have a parameterized constructor box int x int y. Now I will define there itself as I have done with the default constructor. Length is equal to suppose 10 and the breadth is equal to some 7. This is the definition of a parameterized constructor. Let us have a display function. See out the box length is equal to length width is equal to this is the end of the class. Void main. I will declare a simple object like b1. Next, I will declare another object b2 while passing the this one like 10 and comma 7 length, and of course there is change. I should assign here, as you know, there is a mistake. Here I should assign x because the value whatever I pass must go as the argument. This one. Then call b1 dot display and b2 dot display. End of that. Save this and run the program. Now box length is 0, width is 0. This one first line is because of the default constructor object A, and the second output line is of object B2 where the length I have given as 10 and the width as 7. Now look at the program. We will analyze the class box, the data members length and breadth. In public section we have defined this default constructor. Right. As you know, a constructor rehearses the properties of a constructor. This is a member function, but as you see in the display member function, the void keyword, which represents the return type of a function. Here, this box constructor, that is why there is no need of any return type specifier, nothing, just start with the name of the class. The name of the function here is name of the class itself. Box is the name of the class, and we have the name of the constructor as box only, default one. So we don't pass any arguments. It's also called zero argument constructor. So we initialize the two data members length and breadth to any value. There I have initialized with the 0 0. We can give any value like this, like 5, right? And some 3, whatever the value. This is just the initial value given to the object of that. So provided if the user creates simply an object let it have some values to the data members. That is the purpose of this. It can be either 0 or any value which the user would like to give. Here is the definition of the parameterized constructor. Look at that. Constructor name is same as the class. Parameterized constructor. There are two arguments in the definition, x and y. Therefore, the values of the data members should be x and y respectively. The length should be initialized with x and the breadth should be initialized with the parameter y. So whatever you pass from the main while creating the object, in this case I have passed 10 and 7. 10 will become the length, 7 will become the breadth here, because 10 is copied to x and x is copied to length, and 7 will be copied to y and y will be assigned to breadth here. That is why the values of the box object B2 will be 10 and 7 respectively. So are you getting this? So in this program we have seen what is a parameterized constructor, how to define it. Now naturally when you create the object accordingly, in this case B1 and B2, according to the object, whether it uses no arguments or whether it uses the arguments, the appropriate constructor which is already defined in the class will be executed automatically. The compiler selects the particular constructor automatically. It executes that constructor automatically, and thus we get the object data members initialized. So these two calls, one from the B1 object and from the B2 object, both displays is values for the data members. That is why we are getting. Now let us change the value of the length and breadth for this. Let us make it 100 and let us make it the width something like, so width something like 35. Right, okay, save this, compile and see the output. The second object has 100 and 35 as the length and width respectively. Now let's make some changes. I have defined these two constructors within the class only. Look at that. The definition of a constructor, as you know, can be done within the class as I have done now for these two constructors, or it can be done outside the class using scope resolution operator. Let us see how is that. Now this one, the constructor I will declare here now instead of defining. So definition, I will erase definition. Even the parameterized constructor, I will only declare here. I will just declare here, right? The definition I will do in the outside the class. The void display, this one also I can define outside the class, which you have done so far. That is why I don't do the definition outside the class. Let it be here only. I have defined the display function within the class only. Now outside the class, before I write the main, I must define the constructors outside. So same syntax. There is no void. So just box is the name of the class, scope resolution, and box is the name of the default constructor now. And write the definition. Just length is equal to 0 and breadth is equal to 0. Definition of the default constructor outside the class is over. And similarly, definition of the parameterized constructor outside the class. The class name is box and the scope resolution. And the box here int x, comma, int y. Right. Definition. Right. What? Length is equal to x and breadth is equal to y. That is how I'll define this, right? Length is x and breadth is y. Definition of these two constructors outside the class is over. Then the main, there is no difference in the main, no, same main. I will save and compile. See, both the constructors are running. Now I will create one more object. Let us see in the main with another one, right? So this is for object one. Right? This one, I'll create another object box B3. of some other 500 length, width is some 350, whatever it is, 200. Let us see. So call b2, sorry, b3 dot display. See, the third line is box length is equal to 500, width is equal to 200. So as and how we require the objects, accordingly we have created the constructors. The program will run accordingly, and the objects are getting initialized with the respective values. Now let us see. Now let us see the third type of a constructor, which is a copy constructor, which is the copy constructor. Look at the copy constructor now. Can you see the copy constructor? Can you see the screen now? Yes. Copy constructors. Copy constructors are the special type of constructors which take an object as the argument and is used to copy values of the data members of one object to another object of the same class. I'll repeat. A copy constructor is a constructor. It's a special member function which is used to create a copy of an object of a class. So the values of the data members of an existing object will be copied to the new object of the same class. That is the purpose of a copy constructor. So it is used to create the copies of already existing objects of a given class. Now, a copy constructor is also a type of parameterized constructor because it uses the already existing object as its argument. So copy constructor must use an argument which is an object of that particular class only. In that way, it's a type of parameterized constructor. The compiler provides a default copy constructor also to all the classes. Now, let us see when the copy constructor is used in programming, in which situations. In the following situations, the copy constructors will be used. One, when we need to create a copy of existing object of a class, that is a normal use. The second use is when objects are taken as parameters in functions. Values of actual parameter objects are copied to the formal object parameters, which uses the pass by value method. So this is the second occasion where we can use copy constructors. The third one, when the objects are returned from functions, so that case the copy constructor will be utilized. Also, when one object is assigned to another object, when object is assigned to another object of the same class, the default copy it is called. There also the copy constructor will be used in programs. So at 4 occasions usually, when we create a copy of an existing object of a class, when we use objects as parameters within the functions, when a function returns an object as the return value, and when an object is assigned to another object, the default copy. Let us see the syntax of a copy constructor. This is, of course, the inside class definition. Class name and object name, and the definition statements, I mean assignment statements. Here is an example. If ABC is the class, ABC in parenthesis, ABC and OBJ, and the constructor definition. That is the syntax of defining a copy constructor. Now observe the header line. Class name, and object name. That means there is a reference. There is a reference to the already existing object, which is given as a parameter. reference to the same type. That is why class name is written here. So this object is a reference type to the same class name object. So let us see an example. Here is the explanation of that ampersand operator. And operator is used since a reference to the actual object is copied to the parameter obj. Here is an example program. Class ABC, private int a comma b, same class. Public ABC default constructor defined here with a is 0, b is 0. Next, the parameterized constructor is also there here, like ABC int x comma int y. A is equal to x, b is equal to y. Next, the copy constructor definition. See, ABC parenthesis ABC ampersand obj. A is equal to obj dot a. B is equal to obj dot b. That is the definition of the copy constructor. Look here, obj is the already existing object of the class ABC. Its values a and b are assigned to the a and b of the newly created object. Are you getting that? The values of the data members a and b are assigned to the newly created objects a and b. Obj is a reference to the already existing object of a class. The display is a normal function there. Now see the main section. Here in the main section, ABC A1 creating an object using the default constructor. ABC A2 100, 200, which you have seen just now, uses the parameterized constructor. Now ABC A3 of A1, look at that. This statement calls the copy constructor. When you create another object A3 by passing A1 as the argument, what is A1? A1 is already existing object of the same class ABC. So A3 object is created which takes the argument A1. So the values of A and B of the A1 object are copied to the new object A3. What are the values of A1 object A and B? You know, A1 uses default constructor. That is why A and B will be 0 and 0. That is why the values of A and B for the object A3 will be 0 and 0. See the next statement. This also uses the copy constructor. ABC A4 is equal to A2. Look at that. I have used equal to sign to assign the already existing object A2 to the newly created object A4. In this way also we can execute or call copy constructor. Now what happens here? The new object A4 gets the values of the object A2. A2 already we have created here. So A2 of course uses the parameterized constructor. The values of A and B, that is 100 and 200, will be copied as the values of the newly created object A4. So I am using the display functions for all the 4 objects A1, A2, A3 and A4. Now let us go to create the program. In the same program, I have defined the default constructor, the parameterized constructor, and let us define a copy constructor here. Here, I will declare here box syntax box ampersand, suppose obj. This is just a variable name, anything we can make use of. Declaring, right? Declaring copy constructor, right? Now let us define this inside the outside the class. Here we will define it before the box scope resolution box ampersand obj. A is equal to obj dot a. Next, b is equal to obj dot b. The values of a and b of the existing object obj, I will be copying to the a and b of the newly created object. That's it. Definition of the copy constructor is just over. See this? Definition of the copy constructor outside the class. Box, name of the class. Box is the name of the copy constructor, same as that of the class. And obj. Here you can have a space also, no problem. And it's just this to indicate that it is a reference to the already existing object. Now let us create an object which uses box b4. It is a new object I will create by passing the already existing object, suppose b1, which is already existing here. So b1 values of a and b will be 0 and 0, you know this. So when I call b4 dot display, save this, execute. So there is box here also. Declaration is wrong. I have written here. So save. Obj is defined. There is an error. Let us remove the error now. A is not a member of box. Sorry, I'm using length and breadth, not A and B. Sorry. You should be careful. Use the same data member names as which are declared there. Now let us execute the program. Look at that. Since the new object B4, the box 4, uses the first object created as the parameter, the values of A and B will be 0 and 0. Can you see that in the output, fourth line? Yes. Now I will change this. When I use, for example, in the main, I'll be creating that fourth object using B2. I'll be passing the existing object B2, which I have created using parameterized constructor. So the values of length and breadth will be 135. You can observe this, B2. I'll be calling same B4. B4 is created using the B2 object. Let's save this. Can you get this? Fourth line. The length will be 100 and width will be 35 because I have passed the second object B2. So thus you have seen copy constructor is used to create a copy of the existing objects. So later in different programs, I will be showing you how the copy constructor is also used when we have to return an object from a function. Thank you.